guys. We're in deep now. We're in lecture 4. And we're going to kind of pick up where we left off last time. So last time I talked a little bit about how come I really don't like the way fitness is categorized in these two general groups of physical and motor fitness. Like we went over in that video how each of these domains can be looked at as having a physical component and also having a motor or neurological component. I then took it further and talked about how each one is also going to have a chemical component. If you haven't watched that, go back and watch that video. Now we're going to talk about relationships. And the whole point of the synergy model and the name synergy itself, things working together for an accelerated result, a better result, an amplified result, right? The whole point behind it is finding relationships between these things, which we're about to do now that we've kind of reorganized how we're going to look at them. We're going to look at the physical, the neuro, and chemical components of these different things. So, let's look at the two we originally looked at, muscle strength and muscle endurance. Let's just look at these two things real quick. Now, in the original example, the very first video, the overview, I talked about training interference. And the traditional example for training interference is these two things. That's why I put them right fucking next to each other, right? They have very different demands. One, high repetition. Sets aren't as important. You need several sets, but high repetition, longer sets, low rest period important here. Here, much heavier weight, 1 to 5 reps, low reps, long rest periods, many, many sets, very good. Now, let's break this down a little bit, and let's just see how these two things can relate to one another. We're going to, like I said, follow me here. Let's look at muscular strength. In the world of muscular strength, a very common training protocol, I'm going to use simple numbers to make this easy to understand, is 5 sets of 5. Call it a 5x5. This is the bread and butter. This is the starting place for strength training. Now, if you want muscle endurance, they say more than 12 reps is considered endurance. The type of muscle endurance I need is many, many more than that. Kettlebell sport, we're no stranger to sets of 200 or something. Many, many reps. So I need much more muscle endurance. But for argument's sake, let's just say, we're going to do 3 sets of 25. And you'll see why I picked these numbers. 25 reps by 3 sets. All right? All right. In prior videos I mentioned, in the energy video, I was talking about how in this training protocol, I'm going to work each energy system for a muscle group thoroughly. Each one. I'm going to look at an intense training for each of the 3 energy systems, an intense set of exercise. So in the world of strength training, or the ATP PC system / fast glycolysis, 5x5 is the bread and butter. In the world of muscular endurance, the slower glycolysis, the oxidative system is involved, right? But really glycolysis, we're looking at sets of more than 12. I would say more than 20, really, if you want to get into endurance. And for this argument's sake, we're going to be using 25 reps. Here we have short rest periods. Here we have long rest periods. Well, what effect do these two things have on each other? Well, let's look at it this way. If I were to do this strength training, right, 5 sets of 5, I get a total training volume of 25 reps. And you know what? I'm going to actually erase some of this. We don't need it right now. I'm going to get a training volume of 25 reps. Now, we already talked about how there's a skill component to strength training. In this instance, I have practiced 25 reps, albeit at high intensity. That's a good thing, right? Let's talk about muscle endurance. Let's talk about the squat. Let's say this was a back squat, right? I did 25 reps. I practiced back squat 25 times. Let's suppose I did it this way. I use a lot less weight. I use 100 pounds, right? I use something light. I do a set of 25 reps back squat for 3 sets with low rest period. In this instance, my training volume is 75 reps. I've practiced 75 times. One of the ways we get stronger, especially as a beginner, is we're practicing a motor pattern, okay? Now, the intensity of the motor pattern is very important. That's the predominant thing for strength training. But the more often you practice something, the better that neurological signal gets as a skill, as practice, as familiarity to the brain and the nervous system. If I were to do a 5x5, as I prior mentioned, and I were to really spend myself in this training session and really get to a hard 5 at the end, shaky 5, right? Doesn't mean I can't keep lifting. I can take weight off the bar, much less weight. I could do 3 sets of 25 reps after that and work on my muscle endurance. And if I do that, what have I done? I've now fucking quadrupled my training volume. I've now done 100 practice reps of squat. And this is where relationships start to appear. Do you see where I'm coming from when I say, if I train light and increase my training volume after I've trained heavy, my body is going to get more practice than if I just did the strength training. And if I get more practice, the neuro pattern is going to be, they call it, never mind, I'm not going to use a Pavel term. You're going to practice the neurological pattern more and you're going to get better at it, okay? And that can contribute to neurological recruitment. Not as much as intensity, the heavy weight is more important, but it will contribute. Let's look at it the other way around. And like I said, I used a heavy weight here, I don't know, 250, whatever. Here I used a lighter weight, like 100 pounds. Let's suppose I keep doing 5x5s or 3x8s or whatever, and my strength keeps going up. And now I can do 275, 300, 315, right? As my strength improves, what happens to my capacity to lift 100 pounds? This is now a far less percentage of my maximal effort. By proxy, I'm going to be able to lift it more. So accidentally, at a specific load, my muscle endurance is automatically going to improve if I get stronger a bit. Not as much as if I practice muscle endurance stuff, but there's something else I want to describe to you. We're using numbers, we're using math, we're using rep schemes and stuff to kind of lay out a training program. But your body doesn't do that. Your body, every part of your body, every cell, everything has intelligence. Everything receives feedback and operates based on that feedback. It has programming in it. It has DNA. It has a program it's running. Your body responds a lot to stimuli. That's all it does. It responds to feedback. A big part of how you adapt comes from your perception. Not just your perception, but your body systems and your cellular perception. The more often you expose yourself to heavy weight, the easier a certain load less than that is going to seem. I use this principle in kettlebell sport training all the time. I don't need to lift 36 or 40 kilo bells, but I do it. I don't need to do bar training, but I do it. The stronger I get, the lighter those 32 kilo bells I lift competitively feel. Additionally, when I get used to doing the movements with heavier weight, doesn't have to be for a long period of time, when I get used to doing them at heavier loads, through perception, the competition weight also feels lighter. That doesn't sound very scientific. It sounds kind of metaphysical and weird, but it's true. Your body is a system of receptors and cells that kind of receive feedback and respond to it. Heck, the Golgi tendon organ, the muscle spindle I went over in the last video, that's all it is. It's a perception, right? The more they get used to stretching, even fooling it with a PNF stretch, fooling the muscle fit spindle with a PNF stretch, by proxy of perception, it feeling like less tension, it'll allow you to stretch more immediately. This is a very real thing. It might not sound scientific, but it is very real. There's, this is prior research I should have done, but there's a lot of books on cardiovascular training and super endurance athletes. And one of the things you have to get over, and I can vouch for this in kettlebell sport training, one of the things you have to get over initially is the alarm state of your body. You're going to start giving up early in your sets if you're a kettlebell sport lifter. If you're an endurance athlete, you're going to give up long before you could do a marathon initially. It's because your body's in an alarm state. You're in an uncomfortable state. You're in a panicked state. You begin to, what's going on? Oh my God, I have to stop. My heart's too high, whatever. As you get better and you get more adapted to it, your perception of that stress changes. And the voices inside your head change. You begin to think of things in a different light. You begin to go, oh, I'm feeling this. That means this. I'm feeling this. Here's how I have to respond. I have to accelerate. I have to decelerate. I have to change my stride. Kettlebell sport lifting, you might change your pace. You might change, your technique a little bit, whatever the case might be. Perception is very real. So as you get better at lifting heavier weight, by proxy, endurance at a certain load is going to improve. This is a very important concept in this training protocol. Finding relationships between these things. Here's another We're going to use flexibility again. Again, this is a very easy one. I'm gunning for the easy examples. But again, we could always get more complicated in future videos. If I get stronger, I should get more flexible. Well, my capacity to get more flexible should get stronger. Why? Because if I have strong muscles, I used my hamstrings as an example before. My hamstrings are strong, right? They're going to be more resilient to damage. So if I do something like stretch them, the muscle spindle should not get pissed off as easily. Now, again, your body likes to be efficient. So you don't spend time in more extreme ranges of motion. You're not going to have flexibility anyway. So, it's not the most realistic example, but for all intents and purposes, a more resilient, stronger muscle should have less sensitive safety mechanisms. If you also stretch, if you also do PA, you know what I'm saying? If you also practice that. But the whole thought of the process is you have to combine them in order for that to work, right? If you're feeble and have no strength in a muscle, there's no fucking way in hell your body's going to let you open that thing up all the way because it's too risky. It's going to tear. It's going to do damage. It's going to do irreparable or damage that's going to take a long time to heal that it doesn't want to have anything to do with, right? And I know these are like kind of, it's almost like I'm personalizing them and talking about your body like it has like this thought process. But like I said, your body has intelligence. It has strict programs by which it functions. And there are relationships between all of these things when you start to look at them in these lights. Like I said, we just kind of looked at these from a neurological standpoint through practice, right? We then looked at it at a physical standpoint through perception. Higher mechanical load here makes a certain load here, a specific load, feel easier as I get stronger, right? We also, in the prior video, mentioned the chemical component as well, And the chemical component for these two things, while, this one's going to rely on the phosphagen system more, creatine's a little more important. Here, sugar's important for both, but more important here. You know what I'm saying? But really, electrolytes are important to both. Having a high calcium content in your sarcoplasm is important. Having enough salt, enough chloride, having enough magnesium and potassium, to help the muscle function is important in both these things. There's a lot of synergistic things that you want to work on in all these instances. So I hope this has helped kind of paint a picture of where I'm coming from. In the next video, we're going to be talking about workout structure. And I'm giving you an example, finally, as to how you're going to actually put this protocol into practice. But this is why these relationships, this classification versus the physical and neuro one, or the physical and motor one, this classification system allows you to identify relationships between these domains that you might not have identified if you looked at it in these two separate categories, okay? So now you kind of have all pieces of the puzzle. You have the intensity idea, how to look at the energy systems individually as intense or less intense. We now have a new categorization for the domains of fitness. We can look at it in these three ways, and we can begin to identify beneficial neurological adaptation and structural adaptation that benefit multiple things at once when you train for one or the other, and both ways when you train for both at once. All right. So these are the underlying theories as to why what I do works. Kind of the thought process I came up with, the reverse engineering of like the different training things I've been doing. So in the next video, finally, we're going to go into how to structure a workout. Okay. And I might use some examples of stuff I've been doing recently because I haven't recorded that. I haven't been able to. I forgot my phone the day I did my squatting, but I will be recording it all in the future, so you'll get firsthand experience and actual video of the actual workouts being carried out. All right? So see you in the next video when we finally unveil how to structure a workout with the Synergy protocol.